Hey guys, so it's my first Q&A video. I'm really excited about doing this video for you guys. This has been a topic of conversation on my blogs for the last month. For those of you guys who don't know who I am, my name is Catherine. I have been a national team member for Team USA for wrestling for the past 6 years, and now I can impart some of the information, knowledge, tips that I have learned over the course of my competitive career. And today the video is going to be all about rehab and injuries. I am personally in the middle of rehabbing a shoulder surgery that I had about 6 weeks ago. If you look closely, you can see little scars here that are healing really nicely. So I thought it would be a good time for me to share the different things that I'm doing for rehab, the things that I've learned from the other surgeries that I've had, and you guys submitted questions for me to answer. And I got an amazing variety of questions and of stories of people in similar situations. So hopefully these questions and these stories are things that you guys can relate to if you're dealing with injuries or if you're dealing with a surgery that you've recently had. And before I get started, I just want to make it clear that in no way am I a physical therapist or a trainer. I am not a medical professional. I have just personally had a lot of experience with injuries in sport and being competitive on the elite level. So let's get started. My first Q&A video. Let's do it. First questions are going to come from Instagram. The very first question is from Elite Performance Training. If you guys don't know them, you need to check them out on Instagram. Their handle is elite_performance_training. And they show awesome workouts, and they are totally on elite level, and they are athletes themselves. So clearly they have taken the things that they've learned in their career and now they're teaching other athletes. So their question is, thoughts on the machine leg extension? Lots of talk about how it can be bad for the ligaments in your knees. So this is an awesome question. We'll start with my personal experience. So I've never really been big into machines when I lift. A lot of fitness professionals have actually moved away from this single joint movement because they realize the importance of multi-joint movement and how it affects day-to-day movement for your everyday person and how you're able to transfer multi-joint exercises into sport. So because of that move away from single joint exercises, my first reaction is that I personally don't use the machine leg extension anymore. Personally, it kind of bothers my knees a little bit, and it's a little bit hard on my body, so I personally stay away from it. I know that the other side of this is that when you use free weights to exercise, you have to personally stabilize the joint, and when you use a machine, the machine helps you stabilize. So if you are someone who likes the machine leg extension, then your body should definitely be ready to adapt and already very stable when you use free weights. Otherwise, your body could be compensating as the machine helps stabilize for you. Because I am not a fitness professional, I reached out to my physical therapist and asked her opinion about it. And she agreed with me that it can put strain on ligaments, especially if people are using high weight. And because the bottom half of your leg can be used like a long arm lever, the heavier weight you put on it, the more strain it can put on those ligaments and on those joints. However, we both agreed, and I think Elite Performance Training will agree with this as well, because I've seen them use this exercise in some really awesome workout routines, that it does have its place. Ideally, I think probably lower on the weight if you're going to use it, but to isolate a specific muscle is not always a bad thing, as long as this person is well past the level of focusing solely on stabilization and that they know exactly what this exercise is doing and what it's for versus trying to just max load a single joint movement. All right, next question is from Isabed123 from Instagram. She says, I'm a 14-year-old girl and broke my 5th metatarsal. Should I be worried that my foot will never be the same again? From my experience with injuries, I can agree with the statement that it might not always be the same. But my goal was never to make it the same. My goal was to make it as good as it can be. So first thing first is to make sure that you're talking with your physician or with a medical professional, a trainer, or a physical therapist who's giving you guidance of the type of rehab program that you need to be on. I have personal experience with foot injuries. I had a Liz Frank fracture. So what I had to have done was they placed a metal plate on the side of my foot, and then through it did 3 screws across so they could actually bring the bones back together. Then months later, I actually had all the metal removed, but it was definitely a process having your foot learn how to move again. And I had to really focus on movement through every position. And I definitely feel more stiff certain days, and I have different exercises that I need to keep up in order to make sure that I'm feeling good. But remember that your body is always going to react to the stress you put it in. Very similar to the reason and the way that we lift weights. We want our body to react and then get stronger. So through your injuries, your body will react the same way as long as you continue to accurately, with guidance, put the right kind of stresses on it so it knows how to react. I really think that it just takes time and diligence, repetition, so that your body can adjust to the new ways it needs to react when you put it into sport. So the last question from Instagram is more like a story. This is from fellow national team athlete Victoria Francis, and this is what she had to say. So she said, when you're injured, there's always a lot of fear of looking weak or coming off as seeking attention. When she's been injured, she's felt very alone because of this, even though she knows injuries are very much a part of being an athlete. Her initial thought when she was injured was that since it was her second time and that she actually has some family history in this type of injury, what if she's not able to continue to wrestle? And I think that's a very common statement that a lot of people have and come across in their heads, right? So there's always a lot of doubt. She said thankfully she had family support, and that even when she was off the mat for 7 months, she felt like she was falling behind. And for you guys who don't follow my blog, go check that out, because I actually wrote a whole article called I'm Falling Behind in Wrestling. So it basically talks about the mentality and the fears when we're off the mat, and what we can do to kind of work with those thoughts and those feelings. So she continues and says, especially when rankings came out and she was lower in the rankings because she hadn't been competing, it made her worry that she was going to fall out of love with wrestling. And she knew it would be hard coming back, and she was worried about the fear of being frustrated and wanting to quit. She started coaching the high school boys team in her hometown, and she said that definitely re-energized her love for wrestling and got her fired up for her return. So I really want to thank Victoria for sharing this. When she talks about the fear of falling behind, and she talks about the fear of falling out of love with wrestling, she actually combats this with taking her energy elsewhere. She decides to start helping with her high school team, and that love and being around that energy gives her the fuel to know that she can come back. And a lot of times that's just what it takes. It takes pushing your attention to other things that strike up your passion again. When we're worried about what other people are doing, what other people are seeing when they're looking at us, what other people are judging about our actions and our choices, it's really hard for us to then internally focus on what we need to do. That power that we get from sports and we get from competing is that power that we can look internally and we can focus solely on ourselves. And that is 100% an acquired skill. It has taken me years to work on, and you still work on it as an athlete. Our next questions come from the submission forms from the blog. Yehuda asks, how do you make time for your spouse? How has the injury affected your relationship? And yeah, so in terms of making time for my spouse, I feel like when it comes to going and training daily, it's pretty much just like any other job. It just might look different for me, but then when we both come home, my husband and I do the best we can to kind of do the normal dinner thing and to do the normal talk about your day. I personally try as best I can to not talk wrestling. My husband used to wrestle, so when wrestling talk takes over everything, it can feel like your whole world is sport. However, when it comes to travel, when I'm traveling a lot, that can be really hard on a relationship, be really hard on your communication. So my husband and I do the best that we can to communicate daily. I actually think that Snapchat can be a really great way to just show kind of what you've got going on for the day and send it specifically to your spouse. That's worked well if I have such a busy day and I'm training nonstop and when I'm exhausted during the evenings or when we would normally talk, or if I'm traveling overseas and time difference is off and internet is faulty. Sometimes just having little short clips like, hey, this is what went on today, it can be really helpful for your communication. And the last part of this question was, how has the injury affected our relationship? I would say the current shoulder surgery and my past foot surgery, the biggest ways that it affects our relationship is in divvying up home tasks. There becomes a lot of things that I would normally take care of that I just cannot do. And so we have to kind of combine efforts so that the work at home can get done. In terms of affecting our relationship, I think it's just things have to just get adjusted. But otherwise, he's full steam ahead along with me with the plans for rehab. The next question is from Lanie or Lanie. See if I get that right. And she asks, how do you deal with feeling like you aren't doing enough when you are doing all that you can to work through a chronic injury that starts to act up every now and again, limiting what you can do in practice? She says, with her, I dislocated my shoulder at the beginning of my freshman spring season and again at the end of my sophomore high school season. So now my shoulder has a tendency to slip out of socket for a second during practice and causing a lot of pain and limiting my range of motion for a while, so I can't do everything that the coach is doing. Even though her coach knows the situation, understands why I do alternative exercises sometimes, I feel like since I'm not doing what everyone else is doing, that I'm not doing enough. Even though I'm pushing just as hard or just as hard or harder as they are, but just with different exercises. Okay, so first you have to make sure that you aren't continuing to do things that are just gonna hurt you and that are just continuing to hurt yourself over and over and over. Make sure you're real upfront and honest with yourself that are the things that you're doing when you're practicing helping or harming you. Are you spending a lot more mental time and energy and stress worried about what people are thinking, and so you're doing things you shouldn't be doing, prohibiting what you're going to be able to do later on in the season, in your high school career, in a college career? The next thing is, clearly if you're having this many problems and it's continuing to happen and it's been quite an extensive amount of time, it's probably time to seek professional support and help. I know for a fact that shoulder injuries can be very difficult to manage, especially if you're having subluxation. It sounds like if you haven't already done it, it's really time to sit down with somebody who can give you an extensive rehab plan and something that can guide you through and kind of see you supported at different levels so that you're actually able to get back to sport and that you're not continuing to injure yourself over and over. So when it comes to your question about feeling like you're not doing enough or feeling like kind of like people are watching you and seeing what you're doing, okay, here's the big thing. No one can tell you that the push-ups you're doing are hard enough, that the squats you're doing are hard enough, the takedowns you're doing are, nobody can tell you. You know. You always know. You know the truth yourself. So if the case is that you feel like you're really doing the things you can, but you just feel very prohibited because of your injury, here's the next question you need to ask. As you're doing all these alternative exercises in practice, right? Coaches may be saying, do mountain climbers and you have to do them one-handed. Okay, so what if the alternative exercises that you're doing are actually not supplementing you in the right way? Maybe doing everything one-armed is actually not the solution that you really need. It's all about getting out of the exercise what you need. So maybe it's actually coming from a place that's saying you need to push yourself in a different direction that's going to help you push yourself a lot harder. Because honestly, the truth is when it comes to injuries, you are going to have to work twice as hard. You really are. In order to get the same amount of work done that other people are getting, you're going to have to work twice as hard. And you're going to have to be twice as creative. And that, in turn, helps you refocus on yourself. Helps you refocus on what you need to do. Helps you so you're not thinking about what everyone else is thinking you should do. You have to put your energy, your focus into the things that you can control and not just doing things that you think look right or you think you have to do. And actually, I'll give you something specific. I did write a blog on working on your stance, and I would say I highly recommend during these times where you cannot do as many upper body things, I highly recommend working on your stance, because that is going to be the number one thing. The longer you can stay in your stance, the more energy you're going to have throughout the match, the better you're going to be able to react. There's huge benefits from working on your stance. Next question comes from Lynn. Lynn asks, my 10-year-old daughter got her foot stepped on at soccer. Her pinky toe still sore. It's been 2 weeks plus. She's trying to stay off of it. It is not broke, and we had it looked at. She's getting itchy to get in a good wrestling practice. What else can she do to help her poor foot to heal? First recommendation is hit it hard with rice. If you guys haven't heard of rice, it's super old school, but it's still tried and true. So rest, ice, compression, elevation. It's great that you've had it looked at. If you can call that physician or whoever you had look at it, and you can ask them for specific recommendations of things that she can do at this level. Because a big part of when your body gets injured is it wants to not move, and it wants to like protect itself. So you need to ask somebody, is it okay for us to start moving it? Because a lot of times the pain can come from stiffness, but it can come from a lot of different places. So you need to ask a professional what stage that you guys can actually start maybe working on some rehab exercises. As far as my personal experience goes, with feet, with ankle sprains, bad ankle sprains, and the foot surgery I've had, as you progress and you start getting closer, she starts getting closer to healing, balancing and side-to-side actions are going to be really important. So those are questions to ask as well. I would say, meanwhile, I would talk to, if you have access to a trainer, I would talk to them about taping. A lot of times what trainers can do is they can help teach you a little bit about how to either tape pinky toe and next toe next to it together. Wrestlers do this a lot in practicing competition, right? When we have a jammed finger, we'll tape the two together so that it has kind of like a splint support. And sometimes a trainer might actually do like a little popsicle stick splint. I would think that's a great kind of direction to start asking someone who can really teach you how to do that. And that may be something that she can actually wear throughout the day, because it's, unless you're on crutches, it's going to be hard to stay off of it. So having support. So ask a professional, what's the best way to support this pinky toe so it can chill out and it can heal. And meanwhile, she might not be ready or be able to get on the wrestling mat, because it might keep prohibiting her from wrestling and competing later because the injury prolongs. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that she can do. There's a lot of movement stuff on your knees. I would recommend putting her down on her knees and seeing if she can wrestle on her hands and knees and play in those positions, because if that helps her stay off of the foot and she gets to still get that wrestling feel, doing the alternative is the best way to go. Next, Jonathan asks, I've always found that when I got an injury, it was an opportunity to train and improve in other areas. Have you done that as well? And if so, what kind of things do you do? Oh man, do I ever. I have quite a few teammates who laughingly say that I never stop working out. Maybe they're right. I don't know. But the whole thing is that whenever I have injuries, my focus turns to doing the things that I can do. So, for example, right now, I can't do as much upper body, so that means doing balance work, stance work. Once I can run and I can hop, it'll be focusing on speed and agility. These are all things that I can control, and I don't have to waste the mental energy on the things that I can't do because my upper body is limited. Because meanwhile, I'm maxing out what I can do upper body. I'm maxing out the rehab. I'm listening to my physical therapist about what I can do. So focus is lower body. And I'll be honest, guys, like sometimes I don't even remember the things I do because I'll get to practice and I really just get inspired by whatever's going on that day, whatever people are doing. And maybe I'll try and like mimic something that somebody else is doing in a really bizarre, unique way. I'll see if I can mimic a low shot by doing it with bands, right? So I'll just get really creative with the things that I need to do. And that way my focus becomes very narrowed. I come into practice, I know the rehab I need to do, I get used to the specific exercises I like doing because I've kind of created a little plan for myself. And from there, the rest of practice dictate the kind of things that I'll try and practice. So in terms of things outside of the room, I think injuries are a great opportunity to sit yourself down and watch video. It's not always easy to get ourselves to watch video. I think we all probably like sweat and our heart rate starts rising when we start watching ourselves on video. And you give yourself an opportunity because you're not thinking about the very next competition that's coming up. You're really focused on the moment and you're focused on things that can make you better. This is a great opportunity to turn on that analytical brain and see what comes out of it. I used to have a really hard time looking at injuries in a positive route. So it takes a certain switch to turn on in your brain to say, okay, well, I have to rechannel this energy. I have to do things that are positive. And it's not easy. We want to fight those feelings that tell us now we're not good enough, now we're falling behind, now everyone's watching and we don't know what we're doing. I think the way that I finally focused and dealt with them was I asked the professional people around me. I found people who were smart and who knew what they were talking about when it came to rehab and when it came to the things that I could do. And I took an active part in my rehab to make sure that I was consistently doing things that would help me get to the next level. And I would ask exactly what I could do at every stage and things that I could add in. I think the person that asks the most questions and the person that pushes that caretaker to help them reach another level is the person that's going to be successful. And that comes with taking every opportunity that's available to you, even when you're injured, and improving different parts of yourself. Okay, last question is from Michael. He asks, how do you stay motivated to rehab once you feel mostly healed? I've seen it over and over and over in our sport and different sports where someone comes back to sport and they're so excited to do their sport again that they forget that there's a lot more steps involved than just going from I was rehabbing to now I'm wrestling or now I'm doing sports. I really strongly believe that the work doesn't end the moment that they say, okay, you're allowed back into sport. They might not be giving you as many rehab exercises to work on, but it is your duty now to make sure that in your strength and conditioning, in your warm-up before practice, in your cool-down after practice, you need to do all the things that activate your body, activate the muscles that were asleep for however long they were while they were protecting your muscles and protecting those ligaments and whatever was damaged, that they don't just turn back on quickly. And especially as you get more and more fatigued with a practice, they're not gonna keep reacting the same as when you did no sport. They're gonna need repeated focus for you to tell them, hey, remember, this is what you're supposed to do, even when you're tired. So I think once you start coming back to sport, the most important things are working on the endurance so that the muscle reacts the way you want it and can do it the whole time you're partaking in sport. And 2, the agility. And sport is all about reaction. Having the best reaction out of anyone next to you is what sport is all about. And you want to be able to react without thinking. An injury causes you to think about how you're supposed to move, where your body needs to go because it was injured. So whenever you got injured, I would say easily coming back to sport up to a year since the injury, you've got to continue working on those important proprioceptors, on muscle endurance, and making sure you're reacting the right way. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I answered these questions. There was a whole lot to answer and not as easy to answer on video as it is when I write it all out. So I'm pretty excited for my first Q&A. I would love to do another one. If you like this, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Check out my blog. I've written a ton on injury and my own experiences with injury, and I'd love more stories to share. And if you guys want to do another Q&A or more specific things, we can definitely do that. Bye!